What's up, guys? Today we'll be taking a look at the CS202 project number 1. This one actually took a decent amount of time, but you do have to build a lot from scratch, so that's understandable. Basically, the objective is that we have design a program which will take an input file of 10 names, in this case, and read those, and store them into a two-dimensional character array. And then it's gonna sort them and do some crazy stuff with them, right? We got a big long list here. Now it did give us some prototypes for different functions, which is pretty nice. We'll definitely be copying those, and terminal output, this is definitely very helpful for checking your program. Lastly, it did give some pretty strict limitations down here. Actually, that's where to turn it in. Hang on, I think I passed it. Right there we go. This is the list of restrictions. So that's, I think this is actually a better place to start because it says that we can't use any libraries except these. And the fact that it lets us use these probably means we're gonna have to use them. So first thing I would do when you have your document is to just give those an include. And so I'm just gonna essentially be giving an outline for kind of how the project should go, not a full-blown like how to do it exactly here. Then fstream. So iostream, as you probably know by now, that's going to be what lets us print to the terminal and take input from the terminal. Fstream's the same thing, but for your file. Okay, and then it said, if we look also in the restrictions, we have the requirement of not setting any global variables with the exception of the fixed number of names, which we know to be 10 in this case, and the maximum size of them. And in this case, we know that is, let's see, it said there were a max of 8 letters, so it would be 9 because of the null terminator. Sorry about that. So if we go up here, hashtag define, and then, oh, that's not what we put there. Then we can say hashtag define, give it a name. In this case, I will say length. Give it length 10. And then we'll define another macro, and this one will be our max size for the different strings. So I think I'll just call it max size. Right, pretty simple. So those are the only global variables we're allowed to have, and so since that's the case, I think I'll just make them macros. Next, every function is going to have its main program. We're not going to be taking command line arguments. As you read through the project, you'll see that, and so there's no need to include those. And lastly, let's go copy in these prototypes that they gave us, and then we can start to think about exactly what we need to do. So we'll take this. And I would say that, we keep the exact same names and formatting here for these. Perfect. I ended up using more than just these functions, but they're definitely a good starting point, I would say. So looks like we cleaned everything out from that PDF formatting. So we have our declarations here. We'll know we'll need to actually prototype those functions a little bit lower, but we shouldn't have to worry about those too much yet. So let's see what functions we really have. We have a copy. We have one that returns the length, that's why it's an int, and then one that compares them. And that's going to return different values depending on whether the two strings are the same, if string 1 becomes first in the alphabet as opposed to string 2, and vice versa. It'll have different return values for those that we'll have to take into account. Now, I think you could just use those functions, but you would have a lot of redundant code. So just to go take a look at what I had for prototypes, I also just made a function to print the names. Sorry, that's a void. So I might recommend also having a print names function, which is going to take your const car array of max size. And it's also going to take what I defined as a position array, but we'll get there. So I had a print names one. In fact, I think before we finish up saying what other ones I had, so these were the requireds. Those were your required functions. What I ended up doing was defining a few variables right here. So I had the car, source file name, and that's going to be an array, and I just gave it a size of the max size you can even have, which is 255. And then I also had a destination file, sorry I can't type today, destination file name, also an array of size 255, the max. And those are where I'm going to store the file names that the user would input. Lastly, I'm just going to have the car name list. Actually, I guess I should keep snake casing for this. All right. And this is going to be of length, number of items. Each of those are going to have max size. Okay. Just as a recap, that means there are 10. Oh, sorry, max size isn't supposed to be 10. Max size is supposed to be 9. There are supposed to be 10 items, each that can hold 9, so a maximum of 8 and a null terminator. Great. And then lastly, we're going to want a positions array, and I will point out why in a second, and that's just going to hold ints. Int position, that's going to be of size length. And we're going to set that equal to a bunch of numbers. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Perfect. That's seriously all you do for that one. It seems kind of ridiculous, but we'll go over why here in a second. What is it not liking about that? Int. Yeah, right. Okay. So the reason I'm doing that is because it asks us to print it asks us to print original order right there. So what that looks like in the terminal out is having 0, 1, 2, etc., right? So for that sake, I'm just going to have a position index that's going to be swapped every time one of these gets swapped as well, and that'll keep everything in line. So we have an integer of position arrays. Each of these is going to have a one-to-one correspondence with an item in the names list, which is a name, which we're going to have to go read from the file. So to finish off what I had for prototypes, I also had a void log names function. And so this one took some weird arguments. It basically took std in order to work properly. So standard, you don't have to do this if you're using namespace. So just, think about that as you follow along here for this part. OF stream. So that's going to be our output. That's our one we can write to, but it does not read from there. That would be an IF. So we're going to have that. And then you have to give it an and sign, something to do with casting it there. Out file. And that's just what I gave. This is the name we actually refer to it as when we're printing. So you may not have to do that. You may not want to do that. That was just the way I did it to keep my code a little more organized. Then it's, of course, it's also going to take the, in this case, const car array of max size. I put const anywhere its value is not going to change, so that's something pretty important to note. And just it's going to be pretty helpful as you go along. Especially in your documentation, it's something you can write about in the final page. Because you got to fill a whole page apparently. Don't forget about that part. And lastly, we're going to pass it our int position array. Perfect. So I have a log. I'm going to have a log function, because one of our objectives is not only to print out the names to the terminal, but it's also to write it to the file in the same format. So that's what I'm going to be using these two functions for. Now, I also just separated my sorts because each of them's going to need to use different like check criteria in a way. And we haven't learned about lambda functions and stuff like that. Otherwise, we could use a cool object-oriented way to just have one sort function and pass it like a parameter check, but that's not really important right now. So lastly, I had void, and so I'm gonna have a length sort, and these were just bubble sorts. I didn't get too fancy there, and a void. I just called this one alphabetize. I can spell, I promise. All right, alphabetize. That was our function there. Those are going to take the same parameters of both just the car array, but not constant because we want it to be able to change, and the integer array, which also be constant, and for the sake of those functions. Okay, perfect. Now, what we're going to do is so I think, yeah, that was all the functions that I added in addition to the normal ones that were already there. And so we're getting back to the main function here. So we have those. We need to ask the user to give us a source file. So in this case, std cout. We want to ask them to enter a name, or enter source file name. Okay, great. So we have a source file name. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to ask for a destination file. And then we're going to use our cin, and we're going to place this into our source file name. This is what I had the variables for. And our destination file name. Great. Whoops. Okay, so I didn't. And then our destination file name. Perfect. So that's going to take care of those for us. And, you know, I would leave a little comment here saying this is where we're getting user input. Now, to keep planning what we have to do, we're going to want to return 0 on our main function. That's just kind of standard thing to do. Next, we're also going to want to open a file in read mode. So we're going to want to open a file in read mode. We're going to want to open a file in write mode. We're going to want to actually read it there, and then we're going to want to start doing our sorts. So we'll print out the original data, print original data. Then we're going to want to sort it by length. Then we're going to want to print it again. Then we're going to want to alphabetize it. Oh, I forgot comments. So we're going to alphabetize, then we're going to want to print data again. And I'm also going to add that we want to write it to the file itself in this step. So we're going to want to do both these things right here and here. And that's almost an entire plan. Let me just double check I didn't miss anything. And then lastly, we're just going to want to close the file path. I'm not going to make note of that quite yet. So it seems like a pretty straightforward plan in terms of the steps we need to go through. You could derive all these steps by just taking a look at this section right here, just going down the line. Essentially, that's all I did was I just commented them out. That's our game plan. That's what we're going to try to attempt to make happen. So I decided to fast forward through this part because it was getting quite long. Basically, I open up a file with ifstream to be read. I open up a file to be written to using ofstream. I write just a little for loop to pull all the names from the text file and put them into the car array. Then I start laying out the prototypes for some of my functions. So I make my print names one and my log names one. There's not much to say on those. A few side notes to make sure you're in the right Linux directory there. Other than that, it went pretty smoothly though. Both of them basically did the exact same thing, so there was a lot of copying and pasting, just iterating through those arrays. Then I set up my length sort function. So my length sort is a bubble sort, which you should be familiar with by this point. So it iterates through the items, and then it makes a little function to swap them. It has a check to see if the length of, the j+1th index item is longer than the jth index item, and if so, it swaps them. I set up my string length function, all the functions that they had prototypes for given to us for the project. And basically the bubble sort algorithm was nice because once you set it up for the length sort, you could copy and paste it for the most part and just change your check to match the alphabetization one. And so I had just wrote out my little check for the string compare, just referring to the PDF a lot in the project file. Here's a good place to use ternary operators. You didn't technically have to because you didn't really have to take into account capitalization in this example, but if you did, that's a good way to do it. Ternary operators, nice and short for the code. That's coming to a close here. I just close up the file and make sure all my formatting is right the way the project asked for it. So that's about it. So that was this entire project, guys. Hope it made sense. If there's a way I can be a little more helpful in the way I talk about how I'm laying out these, projects and kind of the steps I took to figure them out, please give me some feedback. I'd love to know how I can make this better. I just thought I usually get these projects done pretty fast. Some people definitely don't, and they can be really hard, especially when you have limited programming experience. I've been doing this for a long time, and so I thought, I might as well at least try to make an effort to help those who are struggling in CS. It really shouldn't be something that's hard. It's something that I've fallen in love with and find really fun and enjoyable, and I hope that, and I really believe that anybody else can find that same joy. So I'll do what I can to help people find that. Thanks again for giving it a watch through, especially if you made it to this point. That was, kudos. I don't know how long this is going to turn out to be, and I hope it helped. So go Pack. See you guys later.